This is the chapter where Jesus stops teaching and starts demanding. For 2 chapters, Matthew 5 and 6, Jesus has been laying out what life in the kingdom of God actually looks like. The Beatitudes, the new ethics of anger and lust and oaths and enemies, prayer, fasting, money, worry. That is the foundation. Matthew chapter 7 is where he turns to the listener and asks, "So what are you going to do about it?" This is the final chapter of the Sermon on the Mount, the longest recorded teaching of Jesus ever spoken. And the way he ends it tells you everything you need to know about how he wants you to read the rest. Because Matthew 7 is not a list of additional commands. It is a chapter of forks in the road. Every section gives you 2 options, 2 ways, 2 trees, 2 builders, 2 destinations. And every verse asks the same demanding question. Which one are you going to choose? Let's actually walk through it. Look at the chapter as a whole, and you will see the pattern. Verses 1 through 6, judgment versus mercy. Verses 7 through 12, persistent prayer and the golden rule. Verses 13 through 14, the narrow gate versus the wide gate. Verses 15 through 20, the good tree versus the bad tree. Verses 21 through 23, those who say, "Lord, Lord," and those who actually do God's will. Verses 24 through 27, the wise builder versus the foolish builder. 6 sections, 6 contrasts, everyone demanding a decision. This is not Jesus tying up loose ends. This is Jesus closing the most famous sermon ever preached with a series of choices the listener has to make. The chapter opens with one of the most quoted and most misused verses in Scripture. "Judge not, that ye be not judged." In the modern world, this verse is often pulled out to mean Jesus forbids any moral evaluation of anyone ever. That is not what he says. Read the very next verse. "For with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged, and with what measure ye mete, it shall be measured to you again." Jesus is not banning judgment. He is warning that the standard you apply to others will come back to you. The strictness with which you measure other people will be the strictness God measures you with. Then he gives the unforgettable image of the speck and the beam. "And why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but considerest not the beam that is in thine own eye? Or how wilt thou say to thy brother, Let me pull out the mote out of thine eye, and behold, a beam is in thine own eye? Thou hypocrite, first cast out the beam out of thine own eye, and then shalt thou see clearly to cast out the mote out of thy brother's eye." Notice what he does and does not say. He does not say there is no speck in your brother's eye. He does not say to ignore it. He says, deal with the beam in your own eye first. Then you will actually see clearly enough to help. This is not anti-judgment. This is anti-hypocrisy. Jesus is calling out the kind of person who is harshly critical of others while being blind to their own much larger faults. Then he adds something we often forget. "Give not that which is holy unto the dogs, neither cast ye your pearls before swine." After verses warning against rash judgment, he pivots. Some discernment is required. There is a kind of evaluation, knowing who is open to truth and who is not, that wisdom demands. The point is balance. Judgment without mercy is hypocrisy. Mercy without discernment is foolishness. Then Jesus shifts to prayer. "Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you." 3 verbs, 3 escalations. The Greek tense Jesus uses here is continuous. Ask and keep asking, seek and keep seeking, knock and keep knocking. Persistent prayer is the foundation. Then he uses an argument from the lesser to the greater. "What man is there of you, whom if his son ask bread, will he give him a stone? Or if he ask a fish, would he give him a serpent? If ye then, being evil, know how to give good gifts unto your children, how much more shall your Father which is in heaven give good things to them that ask him? Even broken human parents instinctively give what their children need. How much more reliable is the perfect Father? And then, the verse that has been called the Golden Rule for 2,000 years. Therefore all things whatsoever ye would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them. For this is the law and the prophets. Notice how Jesus introduces it. For this is the law and the prophets. This single sentence is his summary of the entire Old Testament ethical system. The complete law and all the prophets, collapsed into one practical principle. Treat others the way you want to be treated. It sounds simple. It is one of the most demanding sentences in the New Testament, because to actually live by it, you have to first ask honestly, how do I want to be treated? And then ask harder, do I treat people that way? Then comes the first major fork in the road. Enter ye in at the strait gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be which go in thereat. Because strait is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. 2 gates, 2 roads, 2 destinations. This is not a teaching about moral exclusivity. Jesus is making a sober observation about human nature. The path that leads to flourishing is rarely the path most people are walking on. The crowd is not the safe place. The majority is not always right. And he uses a startling word, few there be that find it. Not many, few. The implication is that the path of true discipleship is found by deliberate seeking, not by drifting with the crowd. This was a warning then. It is a warning now. Whatever everyone around you is doing, whatever the cultural current is sweeping you along in, that current is not automatically the way to life. Sometimes the road to life looks like the path almost nobody is taking. The next fork is about teachers. Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. Ye shall know them by their fruits. Then the image of the tree. Do men gather grapes of thorns, or figs of thistles? Even so every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit. The principle is simple. You cannot judge a teacher by what they wear, by how confidently they speak, by how large their following is, or by how impressive their stage presence is. You judge a teacher by what their teaching actually produces in the lives of those who follow it. Does this teaching produce humility or pride, generosity or greed, patience or anger, mercy or judgment? Watch the fruit. The fruit tells you everything. And then comes one of the most sobering passages Jesus ever spoke. Not every one that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name, and in thy name have cast out devils, and in thy name done many wonderful works? And then will I profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity. Stop and let this sit. Jesus is not warning unbelievers here. He is warning religious insiders, people who called him Lord, people who claimed to prophesy in his name, people who did powerful spiritual works in his name, and he tells them, I never knew you. The terrifying word is never. Not, I used to know you. Not, you walked away from me. Never. There was never a relationship in the first place. The dividing line, he says, is not the words you say. It is not the works you do. It is whether or not you actually know him, and whether or not you actually do the will of the Father. This connects directly to what Jesus taught in chapter 6. There he warned against being a hypocrite, playing the religious actor for an audience of other people. Here in chapter 7, he shows the terminal end of that pattern. You can perform the religion long enough that you start believing it yourself. And on the day of judgment, the one you thought you were performing for says, "I never knew you." This is the most demanding warning in the entire Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus places it deliberately near the end. He wants his listeners to wrestle with it. Then the sermon closes with one final image. "Therefore, whosoever heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man, which built his house upon a rock. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat upon that house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. And every one that heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them not, shall be likened unto a foolish man, which built his house upon the sand. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat upon that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it." Notice carefully, both men heard the words of Jesus, both built houses, both faced the same storm. The difference between them was not what they heard, it was what they did with what they heard. Hearing Jesus is not enough. The crowd hears Jesus, the hypocrites hear Jesus, the Pharisees hear Jesus, the disciples hear Jesus, everybody hears Jesus. The difference is whether you put what you hear into practice. That is what the Sermon on the Mount has been building toward this entire time. Not admire what Jesus said, not agree with what Jesus said, do what Jesus said. And notice the final detail. Great was the fall of it. The collapse is total. There is no partial obedience that produces partial stability. The house is either on the rock or it is on the sand. The storm reveals which. The chapter closes with the crowd's response. "And it came to pass, when Jesus had ended these sayings, the people were astonished at his doctrine, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as the scribes." The scribes, the religious teachers of the day, taught by citing other rabbis, by quoting tradition, by referencing previous commentators. Jesus taught with his own authority. He did not say, "Rabbi Hillel teaches," or "Rabbi Shammai teaches." He said, "I say unto you." That is the note the Sermon on the Mount ends on, the authority of the one speaking. Matthew chapter 7 is the most demanding chapter of the most famous sermon ever preached. Because it does not give you anything new to add to your worldview, it demands something old be rebuilt, your worldview itself. Every section is a fork in the road, mercy or judgment, persistence or laziness, the narrow gate or the wide one, good fruit or bad, real faith or Lord, Lord faith, wise builder or foolish builder. And every fork demands a decision. The Sermon on the Mount is not a buffet. You do not get to pick the parts you like and leave the rest. Jesus is not offering theological discussion. He is offering a choice. If you have heard his words and you have agreed with them, that is not enough. The wise man does not just hear, he builds. That is the entire challenge of Matthew chapter 7. And it is the challenge that has confronted every honest reader of this sermon for 2,000 years. In our next chapter of Matthew, we move to chapter 8, where Jesus comes down from the mountain and the miracles begin. A leper is healed, a centurion's servant restored, a storm calmed on the Sea of Galilee. The Word, who taught with authority, now begins to act with authority. The story is just getting started.